Hey everybody, this is Brett, and today I wrote my entire spiritual history up until now, and I'd like to read it to you. You might find it interesting, and I think that a lot of you will be able to relate to a lot of the things that I've been through. And so I'm just going to read it to you. It's on my computer here. I posted it on my Facebook page. But I was raised in Utah, and most of you know that Utah is the home of the Mormons. And I was no exception to that rule. As a child, I went to Sunday school, primary class, etc. I would have rather stayed home, but I did really enjoy the singing. And, like in school, even as just a little boy, I was always the jokester, making fun of the teachings of ancient peoples from the Bible that just didn't sound possible, plausible, or logical, even when I was just a kid, you know. I really didn't understand or adhere to a lot of the teachings, but of course, I sort of went along with all of it as my parents, mostly my mom, told me to do so. Grandparents on my dad's side were also big Mormon influences, and I love them a lot. And if you haven't seen the video of me going back to my grandparents' house, you might want to check that out. I drive by there, and whenever I'm in Payson, Utah, I have to stop and see the old house. It used to be green. I think it's like a blue house now, but I had some really good times there as a kid. Over the years, my mom and dad would fight over going or not going to church. Dad no longer wanting to go to church and stating that I should also be given the choice. And that was easy. No go. In my teens, when living in Ogden, Utah, I started to go to Boy Scouts at church and occasionally Mutual on Wednesdays. Scouting was generally cool, other than them trying to get me to go to church. It was kind of a ploy, you know. Later in high school, there was seminary, another ploy to get you to go to church. Every high school in Utah has seminary, and junior high too, has this thing they call seminary. It's like allowed by the state, you know, church and state allowed to be on the same property. So, all the while, when living in Utah, it became obvious that people that were not Mormons were not treated as equals. I felt it too. It was kind of like how black people today sometimes talk about discrimination. Later, when living in Utah, being a non-Mormon, I too felt I was being looked down upon as a second-class citizen. In parentheses, Mormons think that only they can go to the highest level of heaven, the celestial kingdom. Laughing out loud. Don't even get me started on them. I'll lose my reverence, as the Mormons so often refer to. Flash forward. While living in San Diego, age 20 in 1985, unbeknownst to me, my mom back in Utah decided to send some missionaries to come see me. I was so annoyed by it that I wrote the church headquarters to ask to be excommunicated. I was granted that request shortly thereafter. Yay! Later, my mom admitted to having sent them my way, and I was very angry at her. Did I ask for freaking missionaries to talk to? No. Gradually, things started to change, though, regarding my spiritual beliefs. Throughout my life, I've examined the various religions and spiritualities to see if I could find some truth, some beauty, some wisdom, and some peace. Most, if not all, of the religions I examined were just as flawed, phony, greedy, or hypocritical as the Mormons. I eventually did start to find what I was after in the Unitarian and other non-denominational churches. The Unitarian Church in Ogden, Utah was a good place to start. They cared about the environment, and that resonated with me a lot. I would also go to the Course in Miracles meeting at the Crystal Cocoon Center in Ogden. And the owner was a golden light of helping and healing for many people back then, including me. Anne was a counselor and former nurse that decided to get out of the medical industry because she didn't like what they were doing to people. On her voicemail it said, "This is a place where we treat people without drugs." I'll get a little emotional when I think about Anne. By this time in my life, I knew to stay away from doctors at all costs, and so that really resonated with me, Anne, and her knowing instinctually about all of that. And that is exactly the truth, too. Some years later, my sweet Anne died. I miss her, and I talk to her through the ethers sometimes. One of the most healing techniques I have learned there was the American Indian breathwork ceremony. Wow, talking about emotional release. If you have like pent-up emotion within you that you need to get rid of, learn about breathwork ceremonies. And these have been learned by all kinds of different cultures around the world about the power of breathwork to get out pent-up emotions. Wow, talk about emotional release. Massively powerful. I also loved dancing at the Dances of Universal Peace in Salt Lake and later in Durango, Colorado, where I lived, and also in Silver City, New Mexico, where I lived for 2 years. Lots of Sufis in Silver. If you don't know about the Sufi religion, check that out. Dances is an offshoot of the Sufi spirituality. It's kind of geared for American taste and mindsets. Often I'd also drive to Salt Lake to go to the Inner Light Center. Although it was an older crowd, I'd still felt so much more at home there than any mainstream church. During that time I also gained a friend that naturally has a great deal of spirituality. His name is Dave, and I met him, dreads and all, at the Ogden Farmers Market. He was selling his drums. I bought, like African drums, you know. I bought one of the drums, and he invited me to his house for the full moon gathering. And this was in about 2000 or something. We soon became friends, and he really was instrumental in my healing back then. Dave is one of the kindest, smartest, wisest, strongest, hard-working, environmental, vegetarian, amazing, and righteous. Righteous is a big word for Dave. People I know. People would come from hundreds, and I joke thee not, hundreds of miles away to go to Dave's full moon gatherings. He would hug every single person when they came in his door. Sincerely, too. I would watch in awe how endearing and caring he was with everyone, no matter who it was. I would think that this must have been how the true Jesus was. This was a guy that went on a Mormon mission. He's told me about this. And defied their pushing people to join the church. He was a leader of his missionary group and almost got released for only doing chores for people in Chicago. He'd paint fences, fix roofs, or whatever for people, and the church didn't like that he wasn't getting his quota of new converts. I still talk to Dave once in a while. Although he's... Gotta switch arms. Although he's not quite as publicly open as he once was, he's still such a beautiful person, and I absolutely must see him whenever I go, quote-unquote, home. When living in Tucson, Arizona, I enjoyed going to Govinda's Indian Hindu restaurant for Sunday morning cheap Indian food, and I also traveled out to Patagonia Yeah, so Patagonia is this little town south of Tucson, Arizona, that has a lot of cool and funky and cleansing gatherings going on there. Gabriel Cousins has a cleansing center there, and excuse me. So yeah, I saw Shimshai, a really great musician, play in Patagonia, and then I later saw him in Asheville. And later in Asheville, I enjoyed listening to Howie at Jubilee. Howard Hanger, minister of Jubilee in Asheville, came up to me the first day I attended and said, "Hi, I'm Howie," and gave me a big hug. I was like, wow, this guy wearing a simple Padres shawl. I don't know if you've seen the San Diego Padres emblem, but he wears this thing like a Padres shawl. I don't know, I don't think they're called shawls, but like that. And he's such a real person, and exactly the opposite of the suit and tie wiener heads of the religions that were largely trying to get my money to pay for their agenda and build their giant temples around the world. And when I lived in San Diego, they built a temple, God knows how much money it cost. It was in La Jolla, the ritziest place of San Diego. And when I lived in Hollywood, I noticed that they had one in Beverly Hills too. So the Mormons spare no expense when it comes to spending shitloads of their money. And a lot of Mormons, like I've lived in Utah long enough to know that a lot of those people, largely because they pay 10% of their gross income to the church, don't have any money left over for themselves to enjoy their lives a little bit. Someday I'll tell you about my going door to door, the advertising that I've done for my businesses in Utah, and how I would see their poverty. But you know, there are plenty of rich Mormons, and in any case, I always knew that that was flawed and phony and against my basic inner spiritual guidance. Oh, also, I should mention that during this whole time I really enjoyed, like during that whole time and beyond, I really enjoyed reading books by Wayne Dyer, Carolyn Myss, and other New Agey people. Flash forward to this year. Someone introduced me to Mooji, and I think it was Jude, I'm not sure. At first I wasn't quite so sure about Mooji, but it didn't take long for me to get the gist of his teachings, or pointings as he calls them. Now, whenever I need peace, I just find a Mooji video and listen. Soon I'm out of this body, out of this mind, out of my past, out of the future, and into my eternal soul. This state of being is not concerned about anything of this world, including my mortal being or anything else that's only temporary. It just is. It just observes through the body. It's not scared or angry, regardless of rhyme or reason. It's just there, and it never ends. I remember being sort of in this state many times as a teen. I did this visual meditation thing where I'd focus on a spot on the ceiling. You know how when you're a kid and you got nothing to do, you'll find interesting things to do that are just kind of like that? I did this visual my eyes would blur and I'd blank my mind. This was great for escaping my dad's alcoholism lifestyle. Today, as I see Mooji holding and hugging people after his satsang, I know he's beyond the others I've seen. It is my desire and goal to continue to become less affected by the continual conflicts of this world and in my life. Mooji, along with good friends, helped me along the way. Thank you, Lord, for all my blessings. And that would include all of the things that I've been through, all the learning, all the spiritual things, all the dumbasses, as well as the wonderful people. And so I hope that you enjoyed this history, this full history of my spiritual guidance, whatever you want to call it, throughout my life. Be blessed.